Well, thank you for joining us on this session to do with statistics for IGCSE. This question looks at when the statistics involves grouped data. So let's have a look at the question that we'll be dealing with in this session. We're confronted with a cumulative frequency table. So sometimes we can have frequency table, but this one is a cumulative frequency. So it adds up as it goes. It accumulates. And so for the first group we've got is anything less than 130. The second group is anything less than 140. This includes all the numbers after 130 and before 140. So 131, 132, 133. The halfway mark would be 135, which you would use if you had to calculate the mean. So you'd have 10 lots of 135, and there's none of these, which is good. Normally, if it was 120 to 135, chances are there's none of those. There's 50 of these, but we're not asked that question. So we're looking at the cumulative frequency, and we're told to draw a cumulative frequency diagram to show the information in the table. So let's have a look at where we plot these points. Now, at 130 and less than 130, there's none. So we start here. There are none. Now, by the time we get to 140, there are 10 students out of 200. So this shows H centimeters of 200 students. So there are 10 students who are less than or equal to 140 centimeters. So we will go up to 140 centimeters. Now, from 40, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 squares to 40. So every square is 4. So 4, 8, and halfway between 8 and 12, just here. That is our first point. Now, by the time we get to less than 150, there are 50 students less than 150. Now, this includes those 10. So really, there's none in that group, there's 10 in that group, plus another 40 in that group make altogether 50. So what we're going to have, by the time we get to 150, we've got 50 students. 50 students is all of 40. That's right here, if we can get the correct position, plus another 10, plus 4, 8, 10. So there's 50. Be very, very careful because the exact precise location is required to get full marks. So we've got, just make it a bit more on that line. So just checking here, there's 40, 44, 48, 50 is halfway between 48 and 52. Now, by the time we get to 160, we have 95 students. There's another, you see, if there was between 50 and 95, there are 45. So that's actually the frequency, not the cumulative frequency. Cumulative frequency is adding up, but just the frequency alone will be plus 45. So another 45 on top of that makes 95 students. So what we do is go up 160 to 95. Now there's 80. Be precise, stay on the line. And we want another 15, which is 4, 8, 12, 16. 15 is just below the 16 position. So there's our second point. Now, between up to 165, there's another, if you can see, there's another 20 students here because that makes 95 plus 20 make 115. So at 165, we plot 115. 165, be careful here. We're now going 165, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They've suddenly changed every 5, not every 10. And we go up to 115. So there's 116, 120, hang on, let's go this 80, 84, 88, 92, 96. Yeah, we go up 20, that's 115. So that's 96, 100, 104, 108, 112, 116, and we want 115. Make sure we're on the right line, just below the 116 position. So you see we trace that line down, and that is the 165 mark. We trace that line across, and that is 116 mark. Good. Now up to 170 we have 145, that's another 30 students. So we're going to find 145 above the 170. So there's the 170 line, there's the 120, and we want to go to 145. So that's 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, 44, and 145. Now if we kept going, we should get to 140, that's 145. Just put that mark in there. 145, that should be 148, 152, 156, and 160. Yeah, that's correct. Good. Now we've got another 35 students to get up to 180. So above 180, under 180 centimeters, we have 180 students. So above 180, we've got to go up that line to get to 180, which is halfway between 160 and 100 and 200. So we should be here. Good idea to use a ruler to double check. So there is the line for 180, and that should go across to halfway between 160, 4, 8, 12, 16, 180 there. I'll just write 180. Can write that. Okay. And finally 190, we have 200 students, and there we go, the very last point. Now what we have to do is draw a cumulative frequency diagram to show the information on the table. We need to join these with either a straight line or a curve. Now if you can draw a smooth curve, that is sufficient. So we go along here, and then we go up to that point, and then we go down to that point, and then across to that point, and up to that point, over to that point, and then across to that point. And there we have a cumulative frequency diagram. That's sufficient. You could have used a ruler, that's fine, but I chose to use a smooth curve. Now let's have a look at the next question. The next question says, use your diagram to find the median. Now the median is halfway. Now if there's 120, if there's 200 students, the median is we find 100 at the 100 level. Use a cumulative frequency. We simply can draw a line directly across from 100 to where it gets to the graph, and then go down and measure that point there, and that's good enough. And you can see that that is 162 centimeters. So on the graph you can draw that, but if you look at the question, it is worth 1 mark, which means simply we need to write in 162 centimeters, and that is what we write for the median, halfway. 1 point, just the answer is sufficient. The upper quartile. Now we have quartiles means 1/4 of the way through. Now a quartile is 1/4 of the first quartile is 1/4 of 200 which is the 50th score. The 50th score is somewhere in here. 54, 58, 52. The 50th score would be if you trace along there to find the score. The third quartile, the second quartile, by the way, is the median. I'll just put that in here. The second quartile is in fact, the second quartile is halfway, and that is the 100th score, and we call that the 100th score is the median. The third quartile is the upper quartile, and that's what we were asked for. And the third quartile, the third three quarters, oh, that should be 200, missed that, a half of 200. 3/4 of 200 students is 150th score. So what we do for the upper quartile is find the 150th score. That's 124, 28, 32, 36, 140, 44, 48. It's in here between 48 and 50, 148 and 50, halfway between that line there and that line there. So let's go across in that space, and we go across. You can use a ruler because you'll have one. We find where it hits the graph and then go down and read that score, 171 centimeters, and that's what we find on our graph. So 171 centimeters. So what we will do on this space here is write 171 centimeters. The interquartile range. Now the interquartile range is the third quartile. I'll put here the interquartile range equals the third quartile minus the first quartile. Now the third quartile we found out is 171. What is the first quartile? Well, we go back here to the 50th score, which is in between those, the 48 and the 52 line. Goes pretty much to the graph, pretty much to about 150, 150 and a half. So here we have, well, we got the 50th score. Should have been yeah, right on 50 if we look at our table. So the graph, I read it slightly wrong. So we take away 50. We already knew what the interquartile score was. It was 150. The 50th score is 150. Whoops. The 50th score is 150 centimeters. Get that right? That's the first quartile, and that's the third quartile, and the interquartile range is the distance between 150 and 171, and that is 21. So we'll go and fill in the number 21 centimeters. That's the interquartile range. We're asked here, one of the 200 students is chosen at random. Use the table to find the probability that the height of this student is greater than 170. How many are greater than 170 out of the 200? How many are greater than 170? And there are 200 students, and that's the probability. So let's go back, find out how many are greater than 170. That's these two groups here. Now there's 35 in that group, and then from 180 to 200, there are 20 in that group. So in these two groups, there are 55 students. So you can see that from 170, you've got 145 here. That point is 145, and between 145 and 200 is 55 students. Okay, so that's 145 plus another 55. So our probability is 55 out of 200. That is the probability, and we want a fraction. We could say 55 over 200, but the thing is 5 goes into both. So 5 into 55 is 11, and 5 into 200 is 40. And so we can put here 11 out of 40. And that is the probability of the height being greater than 170. Now, one of the 200 students is chosen at random, and a second is chosen at random from the remaining, is chosen at random, so there's 200. And from the remaining students, there's 199. Calculate the probability that one has a height greater than 170 and the other has a height less than 140. Well, the thing is, the first situation we could have, well, let's say the first person has greater than 170 and the second person is less than 140. That's one of each. Or, you know, that you could have greater than 170 and then less than 140. Or the first person could be less than 140 and the second person could be greater than 170. So you've got to consider both. Let's look at this probability. Well, the probability that they're greater than 170, we already found out to be 11 out of 40. Now, to be less than 140, let's go back. How many less than 140? That's these 10. So there's only 10. 10 out of the other 199. Yeah, or means we could add. Now, the first probability could be less than 140, so that's 10 out of 200. And the second one could be greater than 170. So out of the 199 remaining, there were how many? 55 greater than 170. So 55 greater than, that's back to 11 over 40. We could have just put 11 over 40 here. So that's 110 over 40 times 199. 7960. And we could have, if I just put that as 10 over 200 times, go that to 11 over 40, we could say that's 110 over what's that, 800, 8,000. And we could cancel that. Where's the error? What have I done? Oh no, that's fine. That's not 11 over 40, that's where my error is. Let me just check that. That's not 11 over 40 at all. We'll leave that. That was correct. Go back to here. That's 550 and 200 times 199. 39,800. You can cancel that, and 5 into there make, cancel that, 5 into there goes 11, 5 into that is 5 sevens, 35, remainder 4, 5 nines are 45, remainder 3, 796. So we get 11 over 796 plus 11 over 796 is 22. over 796. We halve that to get 11 over half of that is 3, half of that is 9, half of that is 8. So we put in 11 out of 398. So a little bit tricky, that question, because we've broken it up. It's the probability of greater than 170 and then less than 140, or less than 140, greater than 170. Notice they're both the same chances, and they've doubled that to be, we double the original fraction to get our answer. All right, let's move forward to part D. Now we're after to complete, let's just make sure we're still, everything's good, yep. To complete this frequency table, which shows the distribution of the heights of 200 students. Well, we already did this when we first started. See, there were 10 in the first group, 40 in the second group, 45, 20. So this is where we got these numbers, 10 in that 0, 10 in that group, 40, 45, 20. So in the next group, between 115 and 145, there were 30. And then between 170 and 180, from 145 to 180 is another 35. And then finally in the last group, it went from 180 up to 200. So that's an extra 20. So there's 20 students between these heights here. Good. Now complete this histogram to show the distribution of the heights. This is the individual frequencies, so that there's 10 in the first group between 130 and 140. Then there's 40 in the second group, 45, 20, 30, 35, and 20. So we want to put 30. So we're looking at the frequency density. Now remember, this was only, the first one was only for, if this was 20, but only halfway. So really 20 in that group of 60 to 65, where are we here? There's only 20 out of halfway. So if that was for 20 to 65 frequency, whilst there's only 20, we have a density of 4 because that's the frequency density. So we'll put here a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have to have a 1 centimeter column of 4. Because it's twice as high because it's only half the width. If that was if that was 20 for a whole, you would have the same area. So if it was across one whole group, if it was just 10, a group of 10, it would go across from 2, 20, down 10. And you see, if you take that and split it up into 2, that's your frequency density. It still has the same area, you see. And then we've got the next group is 30. Now 30 across 5, if it was 30 across 10, then we want 60 across 5. So this is going to go, double. So we go across 1 centimeter. And then finally, we have 20. From 170, we have 35. So that would be across 10, 35 divided by 3. (35 divided by 10), 3.5. That's 3.5. So 35 over a distance of 10 is 3.5. Before we had, for this one, we had 20 over a distance of 5, so our frequency density was 4. And then we had only 30 over a distance of 5 units, so we get a frequency density of 6. And that, then we'll just check for part B, 161 to 162. Okay, we had 162. We had 171 or 172, so we had 171. Their answer for part 2, minus 150, and so we had minus 150 is 21. And the probability here was 11 over 40 or 55 over 200. We had 11 over 40. The answer could be 11 over 398. We had 11 over 398. And finally, the answers are 30, 35, and 20. which is 30, 35 and 20. And finally, the frequency density of 4, 6 and 3.5, which is 4, 6 and 3.5. Notice you have a width of 1 centimeter for the 4, 1 centimeter for the 6 and 2 centimeters for the 3.5. Okay, so I hope that this question has been helpful. I suggest you find questions similar in other past papers and practice the group data. One thing I didn't discuss was if they wanted the mean, and if they did want the mean, you have to actually use this frequency table here. And for halfway mark, you would have to use the number 135. You get that by adding 130 plus 140, add those two numbers together, divide that answer by 2, and you'll get 135. So this would be 145, 155, 162.5, 167.5, 175, 185. And to get the mean, you have to go 10 times 135. You have to go 40 times 145, 45 times 155, 20 times 162.5, 30 times 167.5, 35 times 175, and then 20 times 185. Get that answer, you add those up, you add those individual values together, plus, 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 plus. Get that answer and divide by how many? There were 200. That will be the mean or the average. This question didn't ask the mean, but another question on an IGCSE just might ask for the mean. So enjoy that, and until I see you again, stay happy.